Albert Einstein once said that imagination is more important than knowledge. Yet when it came to the speed of light, his imagination revealed a cosmic barrier that would define the limits of our universe. Our galaxy stretches across 100,000 light-years, a distance so incomprehensibly vast that even our earliest radio signals, racing through the void at light speed, have barely touched a millionth of the stars around us. Einstein's cosmic speed limit makes our dreams of galactic exploration seem impossibly distant, confined to lifetimes measured in centuries rather than years. But humanity has always been restless. We've always wondered, could there be a way around Einstein's rules? Could we find a loophole to travel faster than light? FTL, faster than light travel. No technology captures our collective imagination quite like this one. Since childhood, I've gazed at the night sky and dreamed of touching those distant suns, of sailing through the cosmic ocean, discovering alien worlds and encountering life beyond Earth. It feels almost cruel that the universe allows us to see these wonders while simultaneously imprisoning us behind light's unchangeable barrier. We can only press our faces against the bars of our cosmic cage and dream. So naturally, human ingenuity has pushed back against Einstein's limit. We've never been particularly good at accepting no for an answer. Let me be clear. We currently possess no practical method for building an FTL system. Not for travel, not even for communication. But physicists have identified certain theoretical threads that might someday bear fruit. Einstein taught us that his speed limit applies specifically to motion through space, but space itself has no such restriction. That's why portions of our universe are receding from us faster than light, as the cosmic fabric expands in all directions. Could we learn to manipulate space itself and use this to circumvent Einstein's rule? The hypothetical Alcubierre drive represents the most famous example of this concept. Inspired by Star Trek's warp drive, physicist Miguel Alcubierre demonstrated that Einstein's own relativistic field equations contain a solution that could, in principle, permit FTL travel. By expanding space behind a spacecraft and contracting it ahead, a bubble of space could cruise between stars at arbitrary speeds, all without technically violating Einstein's prohibition on moving faster than light through space. The concept faces formidable challenges: exotic matter requirements, staggering energy demands, and the unfortunate side effect of potentially obliterating your destination through accumulated radiation. Yet optimists argue these are merely engineering obstacles, not fundamental impossibilities. A more troubling problem emerges when we consider quantum effects. In 2009, physicist Stefano Finazzi and colleagues showed that warp drive bubbles generate exponentially increasing Hawking radiation inside them. This radiation doesn't just endanger hypothetical crews, it destabilizes the bubble itself. Remember, we still lack a complete theory of quantum gravity. The Alcubierre drive was conceived using Einstein's general relativity alone, without accounting for quantum mechanics. These quantum concerns plague all hypothetical FTL systems. Wormholes, another theoretical shortcut through spacetime, face similar criticisms about quantum instability. Till we solve quantum gravity or actually build a working FTL device, we cannot definitively prove whether these concepts are possible or forbidden. The challenge of assessing FTL feasibility multiplies when we consider the variety of proposed mechanisms: tachyons, Krasnikov tubes, quantum tunneling, and entanglement. Each concept has numerous variations. The Alcubierre metric itself has been modified repeatedly to reduce energy requirements. Physicists will undoubtedly continue inventing new approaches. This creates an odd situation. We may never completely rule out FTL as a possibility. Our hearts might celebrate this. Hope persists. The dream remains alive. But as scientists, we crave definitive answers, not eternal maybes that remain forever unfalsifiable. So is there anything we can say with certainty using our current knowledge? Yes. Despite lacking a quantum gravity theory, despite the countless FTL variants and proposals, we can make one definitive statement about all FTL systems. They all permit causality-breaking time travel. When you hear that FTL implies time travel, you might imagine science fiction portrayals of accelerating past light speed. But the causality violation is far more subtle and occurs even with simple FTL messaging systems. The explanation requires careful attention, so let's break it down methodically using diagrams. Imagine a line representing one spatial dimension along the bottom of your view, with time running perpendicular upward. We've created what Einstein would call a spacetime diagram, sometimes called a Minkowski diagram, after his teacher Hermann Minkowski, who first formalized this representation. Let's place a distant star, say Vega, on this diagram. This point represents Vega's location in space at a particular moment in time. If Vega remains stationary in our reference frame, it traces a vertical line as time progresses, always the same position, moving only through time. This is Vega's world line. We can add Earth to our diagram as well. Since Earth isn't moving much relative to Vega, let's assume it's also stationary, creating a parallel world line. Now let's examine what speed looks like in this framework. Working in Earth's rest frame, we don't feel ourselves moving. We simply progress parallel to the time axis. This represents zero motion through space. Contrast this with instantaneous travel, the most extreme FTL possible, which would connect Earth to Vega with no time passing, appearing as a horizontal line parallel to the space axis. Between these extremes lies the speed of light itself, represented by diagonal lines at 45 degrees. Einstein showed us that light always travels at this angle in properly scaled spacetime diagrams. These are called null lines. We're free to move forward and backward through space, but if light speed is the cosmic limit, then any path below these null lines is impossible. These would require FTL capabilities. Lines above the null represent perfectly accessible trajectories. Stationary world lines, or slower-than-light spacecraft traveling at some angle between null lines and vertical world lines. Congratulations, you've mastered the basics. Now let's go deeper. Consider Earth and Saturn separated in space, working in Earth's rest frame. From Earth's perspective, we don't feel motion. That's relativity. As time progresses, our spatial location remains constant, forming our world line. Crucially, this world line defines the time axis as perceived by anyone following it. This is essential because relativity distorts time, but the world line clearly shows where the perceived time axis exists. Notice that the space axis is simply the time axis flipped around the null line. This provides a useful rule for orienting ourselves in more complex scenarios. Now we're ready to imagine FTL systems. Place Vega back on our diagram as a distant destination. Imagine that somewhere between Earth and Vega, a supernova explodes. Call it supernova X. The radiation travels at light speed, following a null line. Following this path, we see Earth detects X first, then Vega. Now imagine Earth possesses an FTL messaging system. As soon as Earth detects X, we send a warning to Vega. FTL lines fall below the null, like this. We can see that Vega would learn about X before actually observing it. Mission accomplished. But remember, the problem with FTL concerns causality. Let's examine the sequence of events by taking slices through time, simultaneous moments, sliding from past to future. I'm working in Earth's reference frame here, so these time slices represent time as perceived by Earthlings, and equivalently by vegans too. Sliding upward. First, supernova X occurs. Second, Earth detects X and warns Vega. Third, Vega receives the warning. Fourth, Vega observes X. This sequence seems reasonable. Cause precedes effect. Supernova X happens, then Earth detects it. Earth warns Vega, then Vega receives the warning. If you stopped here, you'd erroneously conclude that FTL doesn't break causality. To unveil the causality-breaking power of FTL, we must add another ingredient: a slower-than-light relativistic spacecraft. This leads to disturbing consequences. Return to our diagram with Earth, Vega, X, and the FTL message. Now add an STL ship following a world line above the null. Remember our rule. The world line defines the time axis as perceived by those following it. So the time axis, as perceived by the ship's crew, lies along that world line, not the same as Earth's time axis. This time distortion is one of special relativity's mind-bending consequences. Remember Rule 2. The space axis flips the time axis about the null line. As perceived by the crew, their space axis actually lies here. A remarkable consequence of Einstein's insight that light speed is constant for all observers. Time and space bend to accommodate this constancy. Previously, we tracked event sequences with sliding time slices, lines of simultaneous moments parallel to the space axis. To draw time slices from the crew's perspective, they must be parallel to the ship's space axis, sliding from bottom right to top left. We know what Earthlings and vegans think happened, but what does the ship's crew observe? Using our sliding time slice from the crew's perspective. First, Vega receives Earth's warning about X. Second, supernova X happens. Third, Earth detects X. Fourth, Vega observes X. Look at this sequence carefully. Vega received the warning about X before Earth sent it. How is this possible? Cause transpired after effect. Causality is broken. You might wonder whether the problem lies with relativity itself rather than FTL. What happens if we remove the FTL message? If causality violation persists without FTL, we'd know relativity is the culprit. Let's repeat the experiment without the FTL message. Sliding our time slice. First, supernova X occurs. Second, Earth detects X. Third, Vega detects X. The sequence makes perfect sense. No causality violation. We get the same order that Earthlings and vegans would report. The causality violation isn't a problem with Einstein's relativity. It's inherent to FTL itself. You might ask, does this disagreement about event order truly matter? Isn't this merely academic, with no real-world consequences? I'm afraid not. The causality violation is profound. It can actually allow the crew to potentially break the universe. To see this, let's modify the scenario. Instead of being sent to Vega, the FTL message is intercepted by the STL ship's crew. After receiving the message, they decide to reply to Earth using their onboard FTL transmitter. For perverse fun, imagine they send this message: turn off FTL transmitter. Where does this reply appear on the spacetime diagram? Bizarrely, it follows a world line like this. Remember, our entire diagram is cast in Earth's reference frame. In this frame, the reply message travels backward through time. Now we see the problem. The reply reaches Earth before the original message was sent. Earth receives a message saying to turn off their transmitter so they don't send the original message. But if they never send that message, the ship never receives it, and thus never replies. So Earth shouldn't turn off their transmitter, and so on. Like killing our grandfather before our birth, we've created a grandfather paradox. Perhaps you're wondering if something's wrong with my diagram. To simplify and nail this home, imagine our FTL messages aren't just faster than light, they're instantaneous. The original Earth message must be parallel to the space axis because no time passes. Similarly, the reply must be parallel to the ship's space axis. This simplified picture produces exactly the same result, one that's even more extreme. The causality violation isn't merely academic. It opens the door to time travel paradoxes. And remember, we didn't assume any particular FTL system here. This applies to them all. Whenever you have an FTL system, you also have a time travel machine capable of creating temporal paradoxes. Physicists despise problems like the grandfather paradox because they undermine the logical foundations of our universe. No good solution exists to resolve them. Stephen Hawking proposed the most accepted way out. Put simply, time paradoxes cannot happen. Hawking's famous chronology protection conjecture suggests that nature's laws are arranged so that time paradoxes simply cannot occur. Whenever you try, some physical effect prevents you from achieving that goal. What might this look like for FTL systems like the Alcubierre drive? How does Hawking save us? Recall that Alcubierre drives generate enormous radiation inside the bubble, specifically Hawking radiation. This radiation builds up exponentially and rapidly destabilizes the bubble. Crucially, Hawking radiation is a quantum effect. We still lack a unified theory combining quantum mechanics and gravity. Even though we don't fully understand how quantum effects and gravity interact, Hawking's conjecture essentially argues that the answer lies in that missing knowledge. One day we'll discover a unified theory that neatly explains why time travel paradoxes can never happen, and thus why FTL systems are not allowed. I promised you something definitive about FTL, and now we have it. Unfettered use of FTL systems can break causality and cause paradoxes. Hawking predicts such violations are impossible. Does that mean FTL is impossible? Not quite. One way to salvage FTL and satisfy Hawking is to consider that FTL is possible, but strict rules govern its use. When we removed the STL ship from our diagram, there were no causality violations. Or more subtly, simply demanding that the ship never intervenes produces no paradoxes. Perhaps FTL systems are possible, but somehow specific paradox-causing activities, like replying to that original FTL message, are forbidden. This sounds contrived, but provides at least a possible escape route for FTL. The other option is rejecting Hawking's conjecture outright, supposing that paradoxes are allowed and dealing with the enormously challenging consequences of making sense of a universe that includes them. Hard as it is to accept, we must acknowledge that FTL systems face fundamental problems beyond engineering or energetics. But remember, exploring the galaxy isn't impossible without FTL. It just takes longer. It would mean our efforts to explore space aren't about personal gain or egotistical pleasure, but rather performed in service of the next generation and those beyond. As individuals, we would act selflessly. As a species, we would unite toward a common goal. Perhaps then, the absence of FTL is a blessing in disguise. It might compel us to work together for the future, for something bigger than ourselves. Einstein showed us that the universe operates according to elegant principles that sometimes constrain us in unexpected ways. But constraints can be creative forces. They shape how we dream, how we plan, and ultimately, how we become better versions of ourselves. So until next time, stay thoughtful and stay curious.